The village of Krasnov was a place forgotten by time, its streets lined with crumbling houses and its people weighed down by poverty. At the edge of the village stood a small, dilapidated cottage where Marek lived with his daughter, Lina. The walls of the cottage were cracked, the roof leaked when it rained, and the air inside was heavy with the scent of despair. Marek was a shadow of the man he once was. Once a proud farmer, he had lost everything to a combination of failed crops, mounting debts, and a gambling addiction that had consumed him. His wife, unable to bear the weight of their struggles, had left years ago, abandoning him and their young daughter. Now, Marek was a broken man, his face etched with lines of regret and his eyes hollow with guilt. Lina, on the other hand, was a beacon of hope in the midst of the gloom. At 17, she was bright, kind, and full of dreams. She spent her days studying by candlelight, her textbooks filled with notes and underlined passages. Her dream was to become a doctor, to escape the village and make a difference in the world. She adored her father, unaware of the dark secret he carried. Unbeknownst to Lina, Marek had been selling her photos to a human trafficking ring for months. Desperate for money to pay off his debts, he had convinced himself it was harmless, just pictures, nothing more. But the guilt ate at him, especially when he saw the way Lina looked at him, her eyes filled with trust and love. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, a sleek black car pulled up to Marek's cottage. Out stepped Victor, a wealthy businessman with a reputation as cold as his piercing blue eyes. He was dressed in an expensive suit, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel as he approached the door. Marek opened the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew who Victor was, everyone in the village did. Victor was a man who got what he wanted, no matter the cost. Marek, Victor said, his voice smooth but laced with menace. We need to talk. Marek stepped aside, letting Victor into the dimly lit cottage. The air grew heavier as Victor took a seat at the rickety wooden table, his eyes scanning the room with disdain. I'll get straight to the point, Victor said, leaning forward. I'm willing to offer you $50,000 for your daughter's virginity. Marek's breath caught in his throat. He felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under him. What? He whispered, his voice trembling. You can't be serious. Victor smirked, his eyes glinting with amusement. Oh, I'm very serious. You've already sold pieces of her, Marek. Why not finish the job? Marek's hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms. She's my daughter, my little girl. Victor's expression hardened, his voice turning icy. And soon, she'll be my property. Think about it, Marek, $50,000. Enough to pay off your debts, enough to start over. Or would you rather watch her suffer in this dump for the rest of her life? Marek's mind raced. He thought of Lina, of her dreams, of the life she deserved. But he also thought of the debt collectors who had threatened to kill him if he didn't pay up soon. He thought of the way Lina looked at him, her eyes filled with trust. Could he betray that trust? Could he live with himself if he did? As if sensing his hesitation, Victor leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You don't have a choice, Marek. You're drowning. This is your only lifeline. Marek's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, with no way to turn back. I need to think about it, he stammered. Victor's lips curled into a cruel smile. You have until tomorrow. Don't make me wait. As Victor stood to leave, Lina burst into the room, her face glowing with excitement. She had been outside, tending to the small garden she had planted, and had overheard part of the conversation. Papa, is it true? She asked, her eyes shining. Am I finally going to leave this place? Marek's heart ached as he looked at her, so innocent, so full of hope. He forced a smile, avoiding her gaze. Yes, my dear. You'll have a better life. Lina threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. Thank you, Papa. I won't let you down, I promise. Merrick hugged her back, his eyes filling with tears. He felt like the worst kind of monster, but he told himself it was for her sake. She would have a better life even if it cost him his soul. The next day, Victor returned, a contract in hand. Merrick signed it with trembling hands, his stomach churning with guilt. But as he handed the pen back to Victor, the businessman added a chilling clause. If she resists, Victor said, his voice like ice, you'll owe me double the money or your life. Merrick's blood ran cold, but it was too late to back out now. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. As Victor drove away, Merrick stood in the doorway of the cottage, watching the dust settle on the road. He felt a hand on his arm and turned to see Lina, her face filled with excitement. Papa, she said, I can't wait to start my new life. Merrick forced a smile, but inside, he was screaming. He had sold his daughter's future, and he knew he would never be able to live with himself. The morning after Merrick signed the contract, a sleek black car arrived at the cottage to pick up Lina. She had spent the night packing her few belongings, her heart racing with excitement. She wore a beautiful gown that Victor had sent over, a deep blue dress that shimmered in the sunlight, making her feel like a princess. She had never owned anything so exquisite. Merrick stood in the doorway, watching as Lina climbed into the car. His hands trembled, and he clutched a bottle of vodka to steady his nerves. He had been drinking since dawn, trying to numb the guilt that gnawed at him like a rabid animal. Papa, Lina said, turning to him with a radiant smile. Aren't you coming? Merrick forced a smile, though it felt like his face might crack under the weight of his lies. No, my dear. This is your moment. Go and make me proud. Lina hugged him tightly, her arms warm and full of life. I will, Papa. I promise. As the car pulled away, Merrick sank to his knees, the bottle slipping from his grasp. He buried his face in his hands, his body racked with sobs. Visions of Lina screaming for help flashed through his mind, and he felt like he was suffocating. The car ride was long, taking Lina far from the village and into a world she had never seen before. Victor's estate was a sprawling mansion surrounded by high walls and guarded gates. The grounds were immaculate, with manicured gardens and fountains that sparkled in the sunlight. To Lina, it looked like a dream. Victor greeted her at the door, his smile warm but his eyes cold. Welcome, Lina, he said, taking her hand. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Lina smiled nervously, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and unease. Thank you, Mr. Victor. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Victor led her inside, the grandeur of the mansion taking her breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their light reflecting off the polished marble floors. Servants moved silently through the halls, their faces expressionless. Let's get started, shall we? Victor said, guiding her up a grand staircase. We'll begin with a private interview in my study. Lina followed him, her excitement growing. She imagined herself walking these halls as a medical student, her future bright and full of promise. But as they reached the top of the stairs, Victor led her not to a study but to a lavish bedroom. The room was opulent, with a large canopy bed, silk sheets, and heavy velvet curtains. A chill ran down Lina's spine as Victor closed the door behind them, the sound of the lock clicking into place echoing in the silence. Mr. Victor, Lina said, her voice trembling. Where's my father? What is this? Victor turned to her, his smile twisting into something dark and predatory. Your father sold you, my dear. You're mine now. Lina's heart stopped. She felt as though the floor had been ripped out from under her. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You're lying. My father would never. Oh, but he did, Victor interrupted, his voice cold and mocking. He signed the contract himself. You're nothing more than property now. Lina's mind raced, her thoughts a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. She backed away, her eyes darting around the room for an escape. Victor advanced toward her, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Don't be afraid, he said, his voice dripping with false kindness. I'll take good care of you. Lina's fear turned to rage. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from a nearby table and smashed it over Victor's head. He staggered back, blood trickling down his face, his expression a mix of shock and fury. You little, he snarled, but Lina didn't wait to hear the rest. She bolted for the door, her hands fumbling with the lock. She threw it open and ran into the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. The mansion was a maze, its halls twisting and turning in every direction. Lina ran blindly, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear Victor shouting behind her, his voice growing louder as he called for his men. Find her, he roared. Don't let her escape. Lina turned a corner and found herself facing a dead end. Panic surged through her, but then she noticed a small, almost hidden door at the end of the hallway. She yanked it open and stumbled down a narrow staircase into a dimly lit basement. The air was damp and cold, the walls lined with rusted pipes. Lina's eyes adjusted to the darkness, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The basement was filled with cages, each one holding a young girl. Their eyes were hollow, their faces gaunt, and their bodies covered in bruises. Help us, one of the girls whispered, her voice barely audible. Please. Lina's heart broke as she realized the extent of Victor's cruelty. She moved quickly, unlocking the cages and freeing the girls. One of them, a girl named Anya, grabbed her arm. You have to get out of here, Anya said urgently. Victor records everything. The evidence to destroy him is in his office, but his men are already searching for you. Lina nodded, her determination hardening. I'll come back for you. I promise. As she turned to leave, she heard footsteps pounding down the stairs. Victor's men were coming. Lina's mind raced as she searched for another way out. She spotted a small vent in the wall and pried it open, squeezing through just as the men burst into the basement. She crawled through the vent, her hands and knees scraping against the metal. The sound of shouting echoed behind her, but she didn't stop. She emerged in a storage room, her body trembling with adrenaline. Lina knew she had to act fast. The evidence in Victor's office was her only hope of bringing him down. But as she crept through the mansion, she could hear his men searching every room, their voices growing closer. She reached the office and slipped inside, locking the door behind her. The room was filled with shelves of books and expensive artifacts, but her eyes were drawn to the large desk in the center. She rummaged through the drawers, her hands shaking as she searched for anything that could help her. Finally, she found a USB drive labeled evidence. She clutched it tightly, her heart racing. But as she turned to leave, she heard the doorknob rattle. She's in here, a voice shouted. Lina's breath caught in her throat. She was trapped. The night was cold and unforgiving as Lina and Anya stumbled through the dense forest surrounding Victor's estate. Anya was barely conscious, her body weak from months of captivity and the injuries she had sustained during their escape. Lina supported her as best she could, but every step was a struggle. We're almost there, Lina whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to reassure Anya or herself. Just hold on. Anya coughed, her breath shallow and ragged. Lina. I can't go on. Lina stopped, lowering Anya gently to the ground. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting a pale glow on Anya's face. She was pale, her skin clammy, and her eyes were filled with pain. Don't say that, Lina said, her voice breaking. We are going to make it. I'm going to get you help. Anya shook her head weakly. It's too late for me. But you have to finish this. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small USB drive, pressing it into Lena's hand. This has everything. The videos, the records, everything you need to destroy him. Lena stared at the USB drive, her heart pounding. Anya, I can't do this without you. Anya's grip tightened, her eyes locking onto Lena's. Promise me, you'll make him pay. Tears streamed down Lena's face as she nodded. I promise. Anya's hand fell limp, her eyes closing as she took her last breath. Lena clutched the USB drive tightly, her grief turning into a burning rage. She would make Victor pay for what he had done, not just to her, but to Anya and all the other girls whose lives he had destroyed. The next morning, Lena made her way to the nearest town, her body aching and her mind racing. She found a small internet cafe and used the last of her money to rent a computer. She inserted the USB drive and began to search for someone who could help her. Her search led her to Elena, an investigative journalist who had been trying to expose Victor for years. Elena's articles were filled with accusations against Victor, but she had never been able to gather enough evidence to bring him down. Lena sent her a message, her fingers trembling as she typed. I have the proof. But I need your help to bring him down. Within hours, Elena responded. They arranged to meet in a secluded park, away from prying eyes. When Lena saw Elena approaching, she felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. Elena was a tall, sharp-eyed woman with an air of determination. She took one look at Lena and knew she was serious. Tell me everything, she said. Lena handed her the USB drive. This has everything. Videos, records, names, everything you need to expose him. Elena's eyes widened as she scanned the files on her laptop. This is incredible. With this, we can finally bring him down. Lena's voice was fierce. Make sure the world knows what he is. Elena nodded, her expression resolute. We'll make sure he pays for what he's done. Meanwhile, back in the village, Merrick was falling apart. He had been drinking non-stop since Lena left, his guilt and paranoia consuming him. He saw her everywhere, in the shadows, in the reflection of his bottle, in his dreams. Her voice echoed in his mind, accusing him of betrayal. How could you, Papa? Her voice whispered. How could you sell me? Merrick sobbed, clutching his head. I'm sorry, Lena. I'm so sorry. He tried to drown out the voice with more alcohol, but it only made things worse. He stumbled through the village, his mind a haze of guilt and fear. The villagers avoided him, their whispers following him wherever he went. Did you hear? One of them said. He sold his own daughter. Monster, another muttered. Merrick wanted to scream, to tell them he hadn't known what Victor would do. But deep down, he knew it was a lie. He had known, and he had done it anyway. That night, Victor's men arrived in the village. They moved like shadows, their faces hidden beneath hoods. They surrounded Morek's cottage, their intentions clear. Merrick was inside, passed out on the floor, when the first flames appeared. He woke to the sound of crackling wood and the smell of smoke. He stumbled to his feet, his heart racing as he realized what was happening. Lena, he shouted, his voice hoarse. Lena, where are you? But Lena wasn't there. The flames spread quickly, consuming the cottage in a matter of minutes. Merrick barely managed to escape, collapsing on the ground outside as the fire raged behind him. The villagers watched from a distance, their faces filled with fear and anger. No one came to help him. Days later, Lena returned to the village, her heart heavy with grief and rage. She had heard about the fire and knew Victor's men were behind it. She found Merrick in the woods, huddled beneath a tree, his face gaunt and his eyes hollow. Papa, she said, her voice cold and sharp. Merrick looked up, his eyes widening in shock. Lena, you're alive. Lena's eyes blazed with fury. You sold me. You're no father of mine. Morek's face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks. I didn't know. I didn't know what he would do. Lena stepped closer, her voice trembling with anger. You didn't care to find out. You sold me like I was nothing. Merrick reached out to her, his hands shaking. I'm sorry, Lena. I'm so sorry. But Lena stepped back, her expression hardening. Sorry isn't enough. You have to live with what you've done. She turned and walked away, leaving Merrick alone in the woods, his sobs echoing through the trees. The article exploded like a bomb. Elena's investigative piece, accompanied by the damning footage from Victor's estate, spread like wildfire across the internet. The headlines were relentless: human trafficking ring exposed, Victor Ivanov's crimes laid bare. The videos were graphic, showing the cages, the girls, and Victor's cold, calculated cruelty. The nation was outraged. Protests erupted in cities and towns, with people demanding justice for the victims. Victor's face was everywhere, on news channels, social media, and protest signs. The pressure on law enforcement was immense, and within days, Victor was arrested. But Victor was no ordinary criminal. His wealth and connections ran deep, and he was released on bail almost immediately. The news of his release sparked even more outrage, but Victor remained smug, confident that he could buy his way out of anything. The courtroom was packed on the day of Victor's trial. Reporters, activists, and curious onlookers filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the man who had become the face of evil. Lena sat in the front row, her hands clenched into fists, her heart pounding. When it was her turn to testify, she walked to the stand with her head held high. She could feel Victor's eyes on her, cold and calculating, but she refused to look at him. She swore to tell the truth, and then she began to speak. Her voice was steady as she recounted the horrors she had endured, the betrayal, the captivity, the escape. She described the basement, the cages, and the girls who had been broken by Victor's cruelty. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. When she finished, Victor's lawyer tried to discredit her, but Lena stood firm. She turned to Victor, her eyes blazing with defiance. You thought you could break me, she said, her voice ringing out. But you only made me stronger. Victor smirked, leaning back in his chair as if he were enjoying the show. You're just a girl, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. You think this changes anything? The judge slammed his gavel, silencing the murmurs that rippled through the courtroom. Order. Mr. Ivanov, you will refrain from speaking to the witness. Lena held Victor's gaze, her resolve unshaken. It changes everything, she said quietly. Because now the world knows what you are. While the trial unfolded, Merrick was living in the shadows. He had become a fugitive, haunted by Victor's men and haunted by his guilt. He had seen the news, seen Lena's face on every screen, and he knew he had to do something to make amends. One night, he sneaked into Victor's estate, determined to find more evidence to ensure his conviction. The mansion was eerily quiet, the halls dark and empty. Merrick moved cautiously, his heart pounding as he searched for anything that could help. He found what he was looking for in Victor's office, a hidden safe filled with documents, hard drives, and cash. But as he was gathering the evidence, the door burst open, and Victor's men stormed in. Merrick fought back, but he was outnumbered. They beat him mercilessly, their fists and boots landing with brutal force. When they were done, they left him lying on the floor, bloodied and broken. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, Merrick thought of Lena. He pulled out his phone, his hands trembling as he typed a message. I'm sorry. I love you. He hit send just as the darkness closed in. The trial came to a close, and the verdict was unanimous. Victor was guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in cheers as the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lina felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. As Victor was led away in handcuffs, he leaned close to her, his voice a low, menacing whisper. "This isn't over." Lina's blood ran cold, but she refused to let him see her fear. She stood tall, her eyes locked on his as he was taken away. As the crowd dispersed, Lina received Morek's message. Her heart ached as she read the words, her emotions a tangled mix of anger, grief, and love. She didn't know if he was alive or dead, but she knew one thing: she couldn't let Victor win. She turned to Elena, her expression determined. "We are not done yet. Victor may be behind bars, but his empire is still standing. We need to tear it down, piece by piece." Elena nodded, her eyes filled with admiration. "We'll make sure he pays for everything." As they walked out of the courthouse, Lina felt a flicker of hope. The fight wasn't over, but she was ready. Victor had tried to break her, but he had failed. She was stronger now, and she would never stop fighting for justice. Lina's transformation from a victim to a beacon of hope is nothing short of extraordinary. Her journey, marked by pain and resilience, culminates in her decision to dedicate her life to helping others who have suffered as she did. She establishes the Phoenix Foundation, a sanctuary for survivors of exploitation, offering them resources, counseling, and a chance to rebuild their lives. Lina's story inspires countless others, and her foundation becomes a symbol of courage and renewal. Yet, despite her newfound purpose, Lina knows there is one chapter left to close. She visits Marek in prison, the man who once held her captive but also saved her life in a moment of unexpected humanity. The meeting is tense, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Marek, now a shadow of his former self, sits across from her, his hands trembling. Lina speaks first, her voice steady and calm. "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Marek breaks down, his sobs echoing in the cold, sterile room. "I'm so sorry, Lina. I failed you." Lina's gaze doesn't waver. "Yes, you did. But I won't let your failure define me." Her words are a declaration of independence, a final severing of the chains that once bound her. Morek's remorse is palpable, but Lina knows her healing is not contingent on his repentance. She leaves the prison with a sense of closure, ready to embrace the future she has fought so hard to claim. But as she steps into the sunlight, her phone buzzes with a message. Her heart skips a beat as she reads the words, "Victor has escaped." The name sends a shiver down her spine, a reminder of the darkness she thought she had left behind. For a moment, fear threatens to resurface, but Lina quickly steels herself. She has come too far to be undone by the past. Lina standing tall, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind tousles her hair as she whispers to herself, "I'm not afraid anymore."